Federico, we're back with another episode of App Stories, this week brought to you by Collide, Pillow, SourceGraph, and CrowdStrike. How you doing today, Federico?
I am doing fantastic, and I see that we are doing the App Stories Plus segment at the end again. So we're switching things up again, I see.
We are. You got me out of my set ways and shook things up a little bit a few weeks ago. And I kind of like it. It makes sense to do it at the end sometimes. And today we'll see why that is, because we're actually going to talk today about apps that have great shortcuts integration as part of Automation April. And what we're going to do at the end is we're going to have a little bit of a bonus round. We're going to do this kind of category by category today, talking about some of these apps that we use and the ones that we find work particularly well with shortcuts.
Right. So business at the front, party in the back.
Party in the back. Absolutely. It's the mullet of podcasts.
Very nice. So just as a quick clarification, we are going to be talking about apps that have shortcuts integration via native actions. We are not going to be talking about shortcuts utility apps. I believe we've done episodes and Mac Stories articles about those apps before. So stuff like Toolbox Pro or Actions or Charty, for example, or Data Jar, like those shortcuts first utilities. We're not going to cover those today. We are going to cover different categories of, regular apps that also have a fantastic shortcuts integration via native actions.
Right. That's exactly right. There are so many of those utilities and they're great apps, but there are, in putting together this list for today of apps with great integrations, it's a long list. So we wanted to just focus on those today. And I thought we ought to start with text, Federico, not just because you and I work with text every day, but because the text actions have always been some of the very strongest actions and shortcuts, both, in terms of the integrated native actions that shortcuts provides out of the box, but also with what third parties can do. So I thought we'd talk about those.
Yeah. Text has always been, back in the days of workflow and then shortcuts, has always been one of the strongest integrations in the app. If only because there's a couple of things that relate to how shortcuts works under the hood that are important for text. For example, I covered multiple times on App Stories and in the Discord workshops for club members how in shortcuts, one of the key item types to understand is the concept of a list, right? Everything in shortcut is a list. For example, when you get a bunch of photos from your photo library, that collection of photos is a list item. Or when you get multiple results from Timery, for example, for your saved timers, that collection of timers is a list. And that is why you have actions like choose from list or get item from list, because list is one of the key types in shortcuts. But the same is true for text, right? Text is one of the default types in shortcuts. You can convert anything to text, right? You can, and the system is smart even, because of how it's called the content graph engine. It's the engine that used to power workflow. Now it powers shortcuts under the hood. But essentially what you can do is you can convert anything into text, and shortcuts will do so in an intelligent way. For example, if you have a photo and you say get text from photo, shortcuts will either give you the file name of the image if it's a photo, or thanks to live text, it'll get you the recognized text from the image. So text is one of the key components in shortcuts, also because you have actions to natively append text to the bottom of a document. Like appending text is an action made by Apple. Imagine that. And also you have the fact that repeating blocks that deal with text. For example, you want to, you have multiple lines of text and you want to, place a hyphen at the beginning of each line of text, right? The repeat block, the result, will be text, but it'll also be a list. And you can do all kinds of things with the combination of these two key items. So plain text is amazing, but also, of course, you have rich text and you have Markdown and you have support for HTML. All this to say, if you work with text, whether it's plain text or formatted text, with the exclusion of Apple Notes, but that's a separate conversation.
That's the whole thing, yeah.
Shortcuts has pretty incredible support for text.
It really does. And when you add on to that some of the utility actions, things like splitting text and matching text, which incorporates regex, all those things. And then you've even got your base 64 conversion.
Also text. Yeah.
Also text. So there's so many different ways you can represent things using text that it's really at the core. And so we thought we'd start with that. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Collide. Collide sends employees important, timely, and relevant security recommendations for their Linux, Mac, and Windows devices right inside Slack. Collide is perfect for organizations that care deeply about compliance and security, but don't want to get there by locking down devices to the point where they become unusable. Instead of frustrating employees, Collide educates them about security and device management while directing them to fix important problems. Visit collide.com/appstories to sign up today. That's KOLIDE.com/appstories. Enter your email when prompted to receive your free Collide gift bundle after trial activation. Collide knows that end users are IT admins' most significant untapped resource for solving the most important and challenging to fix security issues, including instructing developers to set passphrases on unencrypted SSH keys, finding plain text two-factor backup codes, and teaching end users how to store them securely, convincing employees to uninstall evil browser extensions that may be selling their browser histories, and a whole lot more. You can try Collide with all of its features on an unlimited number of devices for free for 14 days, no credit card required. Try it out at collide.com/appstories. That's KOLIDE.com/appstories. Our thanks to Collide for their support of the show. I guess the first app I want to raise is Bear, because Bear has an incredibly long list of things you can do in the app. Essentially, all of its main functionality is right there in shortcuts as actions. Things you'd expect, like adding text or tags to a note, but also doing things like adding files, because Bear lets you attach files to notes, or creating notes either by just passing in text from a text action, or even using a URL. There's a lot of different options when it comes to manipulating your notes in Bear, which I really appreciate. I mean, it's got searching, pinning, getting the contents of the notes, getting the files from the notes, getting the tags themselves, and then opening the app, opening the notes, whatever it happens to be, you can do it in Bear with shortcuts.
Yeah, Bear is one of the note-taking apps that has one of the best implementations of dealing with text for creating and retrieving items, which, as we'll see in this episode, is a common thread in all these integrations that we consider great integrations. They're about creating items, but also searching, retrieving, and processing those items via visual actions. It's one of the important aspects to consider for this episode. I want to mention Tot by the Icon Factory. So I love Tot. I reviewed this app on Mac Stories when it came out. Was that 2 years ago? Or was it last year? Past 2 years ago?
I think it was 2 years ago now.
2 years ago,
probably.
right? Well,
yeah.
I have this problem. I think I mentioned it before. I have no idea what happened in 2021. Because to me, 2020 and 2021 are like the same year stretched to multiple months. I don't know. It's weird. So I don't remember what happened in 2021. I guess Tot came out in 2020. It's a plain text note-taking app that lets you organize up to 7 notes with 7 dots. Very peculiar interface. I love it. It's my scratchpad for all kinds of things. For example, to give you a sense of the range of things that I have in Tot, John, I have notes for, let's see, I have the sponsor code for the syntax of the sponsor that I got to put in Mac Stories articles. I have some random notes about PayPal and TransferWise fees. I guess I was doing some calculations there. I have my new Pokemon team. I'm doing competitive Pokemon again in my relaxed time at night. So I have a new team in there. And what else? I also have some random music links. I don't know why these are in here. Anyway,
how do you decide which dot it goes in? I just want to ask.
It's just random. It's just
okay.
random. The thought integration in shortcuts is really well done. I was talking to Craig Ockenberry of the Icon Factory when they were putting this together in the beta, so I was able to provide some feedback. You can set the contents of a dot, so you can basically say create a note in this position in thought. You can show a dot, and that will open thought into a specific page. But you can also add to a dot, so meaning you can append text to a dot, which is great. What I like, though, is the query dot action. This is a search action that lets you extract metadata from a specific note in thought. And what I like about this is that the Icon Factory did it the Apple recommended way. They took advantage of the ability for developers to return results from their apps as a custom object in shortcuts, so that if you use the query dot action, the resulting item will be a dot info object. It's a special variable that is called dot info. And if you tap on the dot info variable, you get a bunch of properties for the dot. For example, you can get the line, word, and character count of a dot. You can also get a JSON representation of the dot. Like, you can get all these properties, and then you can decide what you want to do with it, right? That's the point of these kinds of integrations. They don't tell you exactly what you're supposed to do. They just give you the tools to do whatever you want. And
right.
I appreciate how the Icon Factory did it the native way with this custom object for .info items.
Federico, we should also mention drafts because it's got a lot of the same kinds of things you would find in both Bear and Tot in terms of creation and searching. But because drafts is obviously very automation focused itself, you can run drafts actions via shortcuts, as well as do things like work with your workspaces, because the app has this concept of creating workspaces that are highly customizable. You can make them just about anything you want them to be, but different setups for working with different drafts that you've created in the app, as well as using shortcuts to manage templates, which I think is a really nice way. I use shortcuts a lot of times, just the built-in actions to create templates for myself for things like Club Mac Stories. But with drafts, it's got its own implementation of that, which gives you some extra options that are specific to drafts, which is really nice too. Okay, Federico, let's move on to a new category. This is round two of our shortcuts integration. All right, round two. Round two is going to be what I call everything apps. These are apps for storing all sorts of things, files, notes, lists, links, all that kind of thing. And right at the top, I want to talk about Keep It, because Keep It has had an excellent collection of shortcuts actions, both on iOS and more recently with Monterey on the Mac as well. So if you're looking for an app to store that sort of thing on both platforms, and you're a heavy shortcuts user, Keep It's one of your best options, really.
Yeah, I think the developer of Keep It has done a really good job in terms of adding items of all types, right? It's not just text. You can save text, of course, but you can also save files and URLs, and that really opens up the automation possibilities for Keep It, because it means you can, for example, you can connect Finder or the Files app with Keep It actions, and Keep It will be able to process the file variables for, say, documents that you retrieve from the file manager. The same is true for photos. You can connect Keep It to photos, and you can save any screenshot, for example, or video that you want to archive for later into the app. But also, of course, and I did this in the past, so I'm very, very familiar with the Keep It actions. These actions are ideal candidates for the share sheet on iPhone and iPad, if you want to archive information from Safari. And it's really well done because you can just process the default Safari web page input variable, right? You create a shortcut that has a keep it action, you enable it for the share sheet, and you say, I just want to accept Safari web pages as input. And from the web page, you just need to get the link of the page. And then in Keep It, it lets you choose, like, do you want to archive this as a link? Do you want to save a PDF copy? Do you want to save a web archive copy? The web archive is also something that Safari itself can do now, which I always find surprising that Apple is supporting the .web archive format. But hey, they do. Just press Command S in Safari and you get a web archive. Still, Keep It gives you so many options because then not only can you choose, but you can also tag and you can save into specific folders. It's really well done. And then, of course, there's the search, right? The search aspect. You can search in Keep It. Keep It is one of the few apps that supports smart searches on iPhone and iPad, which is one of my favorite touches of the app. But you can also search from shortcuts and you can retrieve items for shortcuts. So, for example, you can search your collection. You can sort by date created, for example. You can say limit to 25 results, and then you connect a choose from list action to the search action. You choose the item, and for that item, you can get data out of it, right? So this is exactly what I was referring to when I said it's important to create data, but also to be able to efficiently retrieve data out of the app. And this is an excellent example of an app that does it right.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Pillow. More and more studies show that getting a good night's sleep can help improve your health and overall well-being in more ways than you can ever imagine. Pillow is a simple app that can help you be more aware of your sleep patterns and make informed decisions to improve your sleep quality. All you have to do is wear your Apple Watch while you sleep. Pillow will track and analyze your sleep automatically and give you a full report in the morning. If you want to use Pillow with just an iPhone or an iPad, you can do that too with the press of a button before going to bed. If you have an Apple Watch, you can get important information about your heart rate trends, variability, heart rate dip, and blood oxygen levels for each sleep session too. You can even record sounds like sleep talking, sleep apnea, snoring, and other noises that might be affecting your sleep. If your Apple Watch is a Series 6 or newer, Pillow will display information about the intensity of sounds during each sleep session and give you a rating of that exposure. Another valuable aspect of Pillow is helping you make informed decisions to improve your sleep. Pillow comes with a dedicated section where you can discover trends, get personalized insights, sleep tips, and easily compare your sleep metrics to things like your weight, steps, caffeine consumption, and other health metrics. If you want to wind down and relax before sleep or listen to something throughout the night, Pillow comes with an expanding collection of sleep aid sounds, guided meditations, bedtime stories, and music produced specifically for sleep. Naps can help boost your focus and creativity as well as your overall well-being. If you have the chance to take a nap, use Pillow's Power Nap mode. Pillow can wake you up using your iPhone, Apple Watch, or iPad at the lightest possible sleep stage using its smart alarm feature. Starting with watchOS 6, Pillow's battery consumption is minimal too. Last but not least, Pillow is also very privacy-minded. All of your sleep and audio data is encrypted and stored on your device and in your iCloud storage account using end-to-end encryption. You don't have to register or create an account to use Pillow either. You can use it anonymously, and it doesn't collect or send your personal information or data anywhere else. Pillow is free to download from the App Store and comes with a set of terrific features that you can use for free every single day. If you want to try Pillow's premium features, there's also an option to start a 7-day free trial. Just visit pillow.app to get started today. Again, that URL is pillow.app. Our thanks to Pillow for their support of the show. Another app that has a lot of similarities with Keep It is DevonThink to Go. Now, the thing about DevonThink is DevonThink obviously started on the Mac, and it's a very complex and robust app on the Mac. However, the shortcuts actions currently are limited to iOS and iPadOS, which is actually kind of a shame because I think that with all that you can do on the Mac with DevonThink, that it would be a great candidate for shortcuts integration, and hopefully that's in the works. But if you're on the iPhone or the iPad, you can do all kinds of things with shortcuts. You can, of course, create, find, open, and delete items, so you can completely manage your collection of things that are stored inside the app, whether it's files or notes or links or whatever it happens to be. You can update them, and there are a whole bunch of parameter options with all of these. Whether even something as simple as creating a new item, you can pick a type, you can set a title, and then you can specify what group it goes in, and that's just like the main parameters, because it's they have actions in DevonThink that have all kinds of additional properties that can be set, whether it's like adding a URL or a tag, a label, flagging, which is one of those features that is in both DevonThink on the Mac and iOS, and whether things are rated or read or unread, and you can even add comments. So there's it's a long list of different criteria and parameters that can be set for each one of these items, and makes the iOS and iPadOS versions really powerful with shortcuts.
I also want to mention Good Links. Good Links is more of a read later app, but you can also save other types of links. You can save videos if you want to. So what I like about Good Links is that, of course, you can save links, right? There's actions to save links. There's actions to get links. The actions to get links are cool because you can filter those links with different parameters. There's also separate actions to get links that are tagged with a specific tag. So that's a nice time-saving step if you want to, if you're saving those, some links, for example, with Apple, you're tagging some articles as Apple. You have an action that returns a list of just those articles that have been tagged with Apple. So once again, you can save and you can get data out of the app. So Good Links I actually really like Good Links. It's a very simple read later app that lets you choose between reading articles with a text-only view or just opening them in Safari or Safari View Controller. And I also like these actions because, for example, if you use Good Links, you could put together a shortcut that lets you pick an article from the home screen via the shortcuts widget. You could just say, get links and choose from list. Or you could get creative and say, I don't know what I want to read. Show me a random article. And you could do get links from Good Links, and then you could do get random item from list, which is a native Apple action. And you could then say open link in Good Links, and that will be an effective way to just avoiding the paralysis of choice and opening a random article in Good Links from the home screen.
Yeah, I use Good Links for all sorts of things. It's one of the most flexible handlers of URLs of any app that I've ever used. And just to give you two quick examples, for the Mac Stories Weekly newsletter, I throw URLs into that app all week long with the tag weekly. And when it comes to the end of the week, I have a shortcut that I run that just shows me a list of all those articles, and then I can tick them off and set up a template for including them in the newsletter. And I've also combined it with things like Lear, which we'll talk about in the bonus section today for App Stories Plus, where I have saved searches in Lear that then send those URLs directly into Good Links with their own tags, and I can follow particular topics that way without ever having to sort through Lear itself, which is a great way to use RSS. All right, Federico, it's round 3. Utilities and productivity apps. What do you have for us?
I want to talk about Good Task. So if you give me a few minutes here. So obviously Good Task, really powerful reminders client. It's my favorite reminders app. It's the one that I use. I especially love the Kanban board view in Good Task. A couple of things happen here that are fascinating regarding shortcuts. First, the developer of Good Task was inspired, I guess, by Automation April to prioritize they wanted to rethink the shortcuts integration for good task, but seeing when we announced automation in April, the developer got in touch with us and said, I was inspired to actually prioritize the shortcuts actions, so I'm gonna work on these now. And Good Task version 7 launched last week with an all new shortcuts integration, and it's interesting, especially because of one action that I'm going to cover in a minute. So obviously, Good Task comes with actions to create new tasks as well as to get tasks. Now, you may be wondering, why would you create a reminder, essentially, in Good Task if you can just use the Apple-provided add new reminder action? And that's a fair question. And I think the answer lies in the fact that Good Task can do some things in a custom way that reminders cannot. Meaning, you would only use the create task action in Good Task if you have bought into the Good Task ecosystem of doing things for subtasks as well as tags and notes. The problem here, and I just tweeted about this today before recording this episode, the problem is that Good Task came out before the Reminders app had features like native tagging and subtasks and rich links and image attachments for notes, for reminders. All those features, they did not exist. So years ago, the developer of Good Task, Hambum Kim, created a custom system just for Good Task to support subtasks, rich links, and all those features. Now, Apple, and this is what I tweeted about, Apple does not have a proper Reminders API for developers. The developers of Reminders client, they need to build on top of the very old EventKit API. It's called EventKit because it's the same API that deals with calendar events. And that's because for a very long time, Reminders has just been a fancier interface on top of the calendar infrastructure. Now, obviously, Reminders is very different from the calendar app, especially the modern Reminders app by Apple. But there's still no modern equivalent of a Reminders API. And that is why, if you've been a long-time Good Task user and you have a collection of subtasks or custom tags and custom smart lists based on those tags, you want to keep using, right, the custom Good Task system. That is why there is a create task action. Now, ideally, this wouldn't be necessary because ideally, Good Task would be compatible with the native tags from the Reminders app and the native image attachments and the native rich links. But that's not possible yet because there's no API for developers. So this is a parenthesis, but one of my wishes for iOS 16 is to see a real Reminders framework for developers that is not EventKit and that does all the things that Reminders has gained over the past couple of years, so that third-party Reminders clients would be able to do many more things. Anyway, so if you want to keep using native tags and native rich links and native subtasks, keep using the Apple action. If you want to use the custom Good Task values for those fields, use the Good Task action. But this is not what's interesting about this Good Task integration in shortcuts. What's interesting is the run quick action. So we talked about quick actions before for Good Task. It's a way to create your own custom commands that are like presets that do things to your tasks without having to do those things manually. For example, I have a quick action that shows me a list of days, and I just need to pick a day, and the selected reminder gets instantly rescheduled to that day. You can do quick actions to apply tags to multiple reminders. You can do all kinds of things with quick actions. Now, the developer of Good Task created a shortcuts action that lets you run any and everything is called action here, so bear with me, and I'm sorry if it sounds confusing. So you have an action in shortcuts to run quick actions from Good Task without actually opening Good Task. And you may be wondering, okay, that's cool, but how would you deal with quick actions that show you an interface in Good Task. Meaning, how do you deal with quick actions that show you the prompt step in Good Task? And that's where the genius implementation of this lies. If you try to use a quick action from Good Task that involves a list or a prompt, choosing from a list of items, that list of items becomes a parameter in shortcuts. So you can pre-select a parameter, or you can say ask each time, and you will still be able to choose the value from your quick action in shortcuts. This is genius. I love it.
I love this too.
It's a very complicated thing to wrap your head around, but once you see it in practice, it makes total sense.
Yeah, I use quick actions a lot to do things like if I get to the end of the day and I still have some things done that aren't going to get done that day, maybe I kick it to tomorrow, or I kick it down the road to a couple of days from now. And there's a lot of things you could do with shortcuts to make that process a lot faster. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by SourceGraph. These days, every company needs to be a tech company because there's so much code to deal with. It's hard to have any kind of online presence or digital service without copious amounts of code. And code affects everyone. It's the foundation of the technology we use every single day. But handling big databases can be tricky, especially when you think about the volume and variety of code. So thankfully, SourceGraph is here to solve all of your company's code-related headaches. They're tackling big code. More than ever, companies need resources to increase developer velocity, to give people what they need to be agile, innovative, and productive. With SourceGraph, developers can figure out how to use particular functions, find and solve problems more quickly, identify what impact code changes will have on its dependencies, and a whole lot more. SourceGraph is the future of how companies are built, and it's powering infrastructure of today's most successful, high-growth businesses, including 3 out of 5 of the biggest tech companies. SourceGraph's current customers include PayPal, Uber, Plaid, Reddit, Atlassian, and many more. If your company uses code, you need SourceGraph. Go now to about.sourcegraph.com. Again, that's about.sourcegraph.com to find out why so many of today's biggest tech companies in the world are using SourceGraph and to see what it can do for yours. Our thanks to SourceGraph for their support of the show. All right, Federico, why don't we move on to a couple more apps? One of the ones I think we should touch on briefly is Working Copy, because we just recently interviewed Anders Borum, the maker of Working Copy. And the reason we interviewed him was because Working Copy has just so much that you can do via shortcuts. It's really, as far as I can tell, the app's complete functionality is all baked into shortcuts. And that's because, as Anders explained to us during that interview, a lot of developers use this app, and developers tend to be the kind of people who like to automate things. So because Working Copy is a Git client for iOS and iPadOS, you can do things like do your commits or pull requests or cloning repos, or even branching things. There's a lot you can do here. I know you and I use Working Copy because we're synchronizing edits to Markdown documents. So our use is pretty simple. I mean, I think the main things that we do are fetching changes to documents and then committing our own changes to them. But there's a whole lot more you can do here. So if you work with Git repos, this is a great way to automate that process. And then finally, Federico, I think we should talk a little bit about Yoink, because Yoink has a lot of shortcuts actions that allow you to do a lot of things automatically, especially on iOS and iPadOS. The list on the Mac is a little shorter, but part of that, I think, is just because the apps, despite both being Yoink, work quite a bit differently on both platforms. And what I like about this is that you can do things like, not only can you just add files and things to Yoink, which is, a shelf app that stores, really it's like a temporary resting place for all sorts of data, whether it's text or photos or PDFs or whatever it happens to be. And you can add things to Yoink using the shortcuts actions, but you can also do things like copy them or even retrieve them using their UTIs, which is that's the universal
type identifier.
Type identifier, right? Which there are type identifiers for text and images and link, URLs, all those sorts of things. And this lets you sort things and filter them based on those UTIs. And then on iOS and iPadOS, you can also manage the app's new clipboard monitoring feature, which lets you do things like start and stop clipboard monitoring, which I haven't tried these actions yet. I don't know if you have, Federico, but it's really intriguing to me that if you have a particular project you're working on where you're always wanting to use Yoink's clipboard manager, this would be a great way to kind of set up your workspace, not just to have certain apps open on an iPad, for instance, but also to get that clipboard monitor going so that you have those items that are copied to the clipboard available as you work.
Yeah. I really like these actions for Yoink, and especially now with the clipboard monitoring. There's tons of different things you can do when you combine it, as you mentioned, with like workspace based automation ideas, such as splitting the screen and starting the clipboard monitoring for a specific file type. You can do a lot of cool things with this.
All right, Federico, are you ready for round 4?
Round 4, okay. Round 4, media and social, right?
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
So I want to start with a couple of things that I really like and that I use a lot. The first one is Play. So Play is, by Marcos Tanaka, an excellent watch later utility. I really think Play is going to be one of the best apps of 2022. It lets you save YouTube links for later. And it lets you tag and filter those links and easily reopen them, either from the main app or from the widget. But it also comes with an excellent shortcuts integration. So you can add a video from a YouTube URL with support for tagging. So you have this tag field, and if you want, you can create multiple shortcuts, for example, that you show in the share sheet that save YouTube links into different tags in Play. So that if you're browsing YouTube, you could have, say, I don't know, a tech shortcut that saves videos from NKBHD and Austin Evans into the tech tag in Play. But you could also have a video game shortcut based on the Play action that saves videos from Polygon and other, gamers, for example, into a video game.
Have you been looking at my tag list, Federico? Because
it makes sense, though, right?
It does. And music videos is another one that I have, right, because I wrote a shortcut called MyTunes, which uses Play and Downy shortcuts actions to download music videos that I then put into the Channels app to create my own music video channel.
Very nice. What I also want to call out is the Get Videos action. And the Get Videos action has lots of filters. I think it's one of the richest implementations of getting data out of an app that I've seen to date. You can filter videos by title, by channel, by played or unplayed status. You can sort by duration. This is excellent because you can do things like show me the 5 longest videos from my library or stuff like that. It's an excellent filter. You can filter by date, and you can do things like added before or added after a specific date. So you can also find your videos that you saved in a specific time period, for example. Really well done, fantastic implementation of saving, but also retrieving data from Play. The other app I want to mention is Castro, the podcast client. Now, no matter how many different podcast clients I do, I always come back to Castro. And I think I now understand why, and I have accepted why. And that is my mental model for thinking of which podcasts I want to listen to is exactly how the queue in Castro is designed. I've tried Overcast. I've tried Apple Podcasts again as of a couple of weeks ago. I tried Pocket Casts and all these other podcast clients. I always go back to Castro because my brain thinks of the things I want to listen to exactly how the queue is designed and how it works in Castro. Castro has a solid shortcuts integration. This is not common in podcast clients, which is why I want to mention this here. You can toggle audio effects on and off from shortcuts. So you don't have to use the audio settings screen from Castro. You can do so from shortcuts. You can subscribe to shows directly from shortcuts. And my favorite, you can get your episode queue from the app, but you can also adjust the queue position of specific episodes in Castro from shortcuts.
Interesting.
This is interesting because you can put together shortcuts to do things like, okay, show me my queue, let me pick an episode, and then let me choose if I want to move it up and down. Or you could do so programmatic. Like you can do things if in the queue, and just I'm spitballing here, and I'm sorry that it's too late for the shortcuts contest now, but you can build this if you want. You can do things like get my queue. If you find episodes that are from app stories, move them to the top of my queue. I mean, obviously, you want to move them to the top of the queue. Of course you do. Right? But you can do things like that, right? You can do that. And I think it's a really fascinating implementation based on parameters, based on based on retrieving data out of Castro. And this is also important. We should mention this, modifying data. Because it's not just about saving new items or getting existing items. It's also important to have actions that modify existing items from shortcuts. And Castro does this.
What I would really like to see Castro add, there's one action that it doesn't have, which is adding, if you're a premium subscriber, adding audio to the uploaded audio. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, to the audio, to the side loading section. Whatever.
Side loading, right, exactly. Because that would be a fantastic way to use things like those Matter, like those the Matter audio files that you created with your shortcut for, what is it called? I forget. Matter Utility or something like that. Your shortcut that you wrote about on Matterbot. Right. But you could just have those audio files download to a folder somewhere on your Mac or your iPad or whatever, and then use Castro actions to upload them to Castro automatically without having to do any more. But you can't do that just yet. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by CrowdStrike. Here's an unsettling fact for you. 70% of cyber attacks are targeted at small to medium-sized businesses. You might be wondering how serious a cyber attack even is. Well, about half of businesses will become unprofitable within a month of being breached. Cyber criminals know smaller businesses may not have the resources to defend themselves from ransomware and malware. This makes smaller companies an easy target, and the ransom collected can add up quickly. If you want to better protect your business, CrowdStrike has the solution for you. Falcon Pro by CrowdStrike is the cybersecurity solution for your small business needs. It provides superior prevention from cyber attacks, detects malicious activity, and offers immediate response capabilities for your business. And it's all fully deployed in just minutes to protect your organization. Falcon Pro provides features like antivirus protection, firewall management, device control, and integrated threat intelligence, all in one cloud-based solution. With Falcon Pro, your systems are protected against all cyber threats, not just malware, even when devices aren't connected to the internet, and you can say goodbye to sluggish antivirus scans and inconvenient reboots that delay your team's productivity. Rated 4.9 out of 5 by Gartner Peer Insights, CrowdStrike is the cybersecurity your team needs. Head on over to crowdstrike.com/appstories to start a free 15-day trial. Again, that's crowdstrike.com/appstories for a free 15-day trial of CrowdStrike Falcon Pro. Our thanks to CrowdStrike for their support of the show. All right, let me move us on to Pixelmator Pro. And Pixelmator Pro has one of the deepest collections of actions that I've seen anywhere. Really, all of the core ways you can edit an image in Pixelmator Pro are present in its actions. You can do things like, you can even do things like cropping. You can apply effects. You can adjust colors. You can optimize them for export for the web. You can even mask images and do things like the ML super resolution. So, I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. But if you ever look in that right-hand sidebar of Pixelmator Pro, all the different things you can do to adjust an image, most of them are in the shortcuts actions as well, which is great if you have a long list of images where you really, they're similar images, so you really want to apply the same effect or the same cropping or something like that to them. It's a great way to batch process images. I guess finally, Federico, for this section, I'd like to mention Tweetbot on iOS because, Twitter apps, Twitter clients don't tend to have a lot of shortcuts actions historically, but Tweetbot has done a very nice job with their iOS and iPadOS app. The Mac one, not so much. I mean, the Mac is behind when it comes to Tweetbot. Hopefully they're working on that. But you can do things like, of course, opening the app or opening a Twitter URL into Tweetbot automatically. But you can also post your tweets, you can search, and you can get people's profiles. And the profiles one is one I haven't actually used myself, but I think I'm, having gone through this process of looking at a lot of these and revisiting a lot of these actions and apps for this episode, I think I'm going to give that a try because I've been doing some things with profiles because I need to look them up pretty frequently for some of the things we do on Mac stories. So I think Tweetbot may be a better way to do it than I've already been doing it. Federico, we are moving on to round 5.
Final round.
And this is a weird category that I came up with called Alone in the Crowd because there are some categories where there aren't a lot of great apps with shortcuts integrations, but there are some exceptions to those rules. And I wanted to call out the ones that are doing a particularly good job, even if other apps in the category aren't. Mm-hmm. And I want to start with, first of all, a combination category, which is both RSS clients and read later apps. Read later apps, there's, other than good links, which we already covered, there's not a lot going on in the read later space.
Yeah, we're going to mention one in the bonus round on App Stories Plus, but yeah, it's surprisingly not great.
Yeah, it's surprisingly not great. And I think my sense is that there are an awful lot of these apps that really don't want your data leaving them. They want you to read your articles right there. And I get it, especially if you're using it strictly as a read later app. But a lot of times I've used read later apps like I use Good Links as also kind of a URL manager. And I want to be able to get those URLs out. And there aren't a lot of options among the read later apps. But turning to RSS readers, I really want to call out Lear because Lear does a fantastic job. As I mentioned a little earlier in the show, they have saved searches. And you can do, with the actions in Lear, you can have searches that run automatically. You put this on a schedule, and it can search through your unread or read or all of your items and pull out particular entries in your library and send them somewhere else. And that's how I'm doing some topic searches that I then ultimately save in Good Links. But there's a whole lot more than that. You can, of course, subscribe to feeds. You can find the articles, and you can get all sorts of different details about each particular item in your feed. It's not just the URL, but you can get all kinds of different parameters there as well. Do you have one for us, Federico?
Yes. Calendars.
Ah, yes, calendars.
And specifically fantastical. Now, calendars are... I get it, why there are many third-party calendar actions with shortcuts integration. And that's because the calendar app by Apple has an amazing shortcuts integration.
Yeah, it does.
Dates are, and I mean, you know this, John, dates are another fantastic default type in shortcuts. You can do a lot of things with date and date math in shortcuts, and that is, of course, reflected in the calendar actions that are provided to you by Apple for free. So I get it. It makes sense that there aren't that many third-party integrations because there's no need to. Unless the calendar client you're using does a few things that are unique and very different from the Apple Calendar app. And that is the case for Fantastical. I want to call out three things. First one, there's a weird thing in shortcuts where don't be confused if you see double the number of Fantastical actions.
Oh, true.
There is a legacy category with 3, I believe, Fantastical actions listed under the calendar section of shortcuts. Do not use those actions. Those are based on the old X callback URL integration for Fantastical in shortcuts. I don't know why they haven't been removed.
It is a workflow thing, right?
Because it's a workflow thing that it's still in there, though. And it's not the only instance of this. I believe Things has the same problem.
They do. There was a point at which that was being managed because my old app Blink, I remember when it was taken out of shortcuts, it was taken out because the app was no longer being developed. But these apps that are still being actively developed never were removed, even though that they provide their own, native actions.
So yeah, look for the Fantastical actions under the Fantastical category, not under the calendar category. Now, the other two things I want to mention. First, you can choose a specific calendar set from Fantastical from shortcuts. This is one of the things that Fantastical does that Apple Calendar doesn't. You can combine multiple calendars into specific calendar sets, and you can load those calendar sets from shortcuts as parameters. It's really well done. I use this all the time in combination with the second thing, which is you can switch views in the app from shortcuts. So you can switch to day view or week view or quarter view, for example, or month view from shortcuts. I do this all the time in the shortcut that I shared a while back called Load Set. This lets me choose a specific calendar set from Fantastical, but it combines the set with the specific view. Because, for example, for my personal events, I want to see week view. But if I'm scheduling a podcast, I want to see a month view because I want to see all the slots in my schedule. So I can combine loading a set with switching a view in the same shortcut. It's really well done. Fantastical is an excellent calendar client. I use it. I love it. It does things that Calendar doesn't, probably never will, but the shortcuts integration is also solid.
Yeah, that's definitely a good choice. I want to mention channels because there are so few video playback apps that have shortcuts support that channels really stands out, even though I'd like to see it go a little deeper in the future with shortcuts actions. Right now, most of the channel's actions are about showing you things in the app or playback. So you can show your collections. You can send commands from one device to another. So, for instance, if you're running a shortcut on your iPhone, you can cause things to happen on the channel's app on your Apple TV, for instance. You can also watch various categories of things on the channel's app, whether it's a channel of like over-the-air TV or a particular show and that kind of thing. What it doesn't have that I really hope it does get in the future is the ability to manage your library. And by that, I mean adding files to a collection, whether it's a movie or a TV show. You could, if you had the ability to manage your library, you'd be able to use an app like Downy on the Mac to rip a DVD, for instance, to a file, and then have that file automatically added to a movie collection. There are things like that aren't quite possible yet. There needs to be a little bit of manual intervention sometimes on the channel server to do that. And then finally, Federico, to kind of close out this episode,
okay,
I think we should mention Music Harbor because that's another Marcos Tanaka app. And Marcos is really good at...
Marcos is really good. You could stop there.
I should stop there. But he's very good at adding good shortcuts actions to his apps. And Music Harbor is no exception to that rule. And I think the reason I included that in this particular round is that I find it a little frustrating that it's hard. There's not a lot of things you can do as shortcuts when it comes to music. The Apple actions are outdated. Third-party apps don't really do much in terms of music playback. And while Music Harbor isn't a music playback app. It's for collecting new releases and upcoming releases that you can browse, almost like an RSS reader in a sense. It does do a really good job, and I feel like other developers, if it's even possible, given the way that the APIs work for music, should think about ways you can do that. And I run into this with things like Marvis, for instance, which is an app I absolutely love, but it doesn't even have ShareSheet integration where I could take a URL from Apple Music and open it in Marvis and play it there instead of playing it in the music app. I'd really like to see third-party music apps find ways to take links to Apple Music or Spotify or whatever it happens to be and play them natively in their apps, as opposed to always being taken to Apple's music app. Yeah. So let's hope for that. But in the meantime, there are apps like Music Harbor by Marcos that does a really nice job, even if it is kind of a utility, a music utility that's a little bit off to the side. All right, Federico, I think that's a great episode. We're going to do a bonus segment, as I mentioned, in App Stories Plus, which you can, of course, get access to by signing up for App Stories Plus, which is the biggest and best version of App Stories. It always includes a bonus segment. It's delivered to your podcast player a day early before anybody else gets it. It doesn't have any ads, and of course, it's delivered in high bitrate audio, so Federico and I sound really good. Just go to appstories.plus today to sign up and take advantage of all the great perks that we have with App Stories Plus. All right, I'd also like to thank our sponsors for today's episode. That is Collide, Pillow, SourceGraph, and CrowdStrike. You can find Federico and I over at macstories.net. Federico is on Twitter and Instagram too, where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.